Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, distinguished Nobel laureates, faculty, students, and friends, good morning. Welcome to the Nobel Heroes Forum, Shaping Science and Future, co-hosted by the University of Hong Kong and Lindau Nobel Laureate Meetings. I am Joseph Huang Li, a second-year law student. This momentous event brings 6 Nobel laureates here to HKU for insightful discussions on how fundamental research shapes the future of science, technology, health, and the global economy. Unfortunately, Professor Hartmut Michel, one of our Nobel laureates, is unable to join us today. Nevertheless, he sends his sincere apologies and best wishes to everyone here. We look forward to welcoming him at a future occasion. Well, to start off, please join me in welcoming Professor Xiang Zhang, President and Vice Chancellor of the University of Hong Kong, to deliver some opening remarks. Professor Zhang, please.
Chief Secretary Chen, Council Chairman Peter Wang, Nicholas, distinguished Nobel laureate Professor Krausz, Novoselov, Wüthrich, Ignarro, Merton, and Hunt. Colleagues, students, ladies and gentlemen, we are very honored today at Hong Kong U to host this Nobel Laureate Forum. Also, you all know that these 6 luminaries covers from the area from chemistry, physics, medicine, and also economics. Very broad. Their important discoveries and studies has shaped the world. Many of you probably know that science research is important, but 6 of them made very, very major breakthrough that really not only just fundamental knowledge creation, but also really made a great translation to our benefit, our human life. Now, we all know that today, innovation, science, research are all important. And we all appreciate for many, many years that since Newton time, Einstein time, their discoveries, their invention really shape what we live today. Now, without the discovery of Newton's law, we don't build our cars. We don't know how to do acceleration of the rocket to the moon or Mars. Many of you still probably remember 1960, late 60s, that President Kennedy set the vision of sending men to the moon. Now, that vision, of course, realized by many other countries later on. In the beginning, it seems like not very practical. Well, you send the person to the moon, and yeah, it's ambition. But what that translates, the whole research, years of research, translate into many, many applications. Today, we know solar cells actually research, and today, many of you at home use a solar cell, translate sunlight into energy. That is actually trickle-down application of space technology. And some of you today wear the shirts called wrinkle-free shirts. Those wrinkle-free shirts actually have some material coatings on that. That's also from the space technology developed in the 1960s. So a lot of original study research, which in the beginning seems no application at all, but translate into important applications decades later. So today we are really honored to have 6 of them to be on the stage with our students and our teachers and so on, to have shared their experience and discoveries. But at the same time, we all know today's world is not that easy as well. On the one hand, we're facing a growing population in the next 40, 50 years. We're going to have 2 billion people to be born. In North Africa, a lot of them. In Southeast Asia, they need water, energy, food, and not to say clothing and cars, oils and so on. But at the same time, the climate change, some doesn't believe, but a lot of us believe, that already have extreme weathers here and there that cause the food shortage, water supply problems, and so on. Many of you remember that India and Pakistan almost has a war early last year, and because of want to control the water flow. So a lot of this need a science breakthrough, need how we discover more science and more discoveries to help elevate these challenges. But at the same time, we are facing also a geopolitics. Many of you know that. Within this globe that now compared with 20 years ago, we are much more difficult to work with in terms of science, collaborations, even economic activities. So in such a polarized world, how we work together to achieve a common goal in science and to promote the prosperity of the world. And that is very, very challenging in today's climate. So we hope today we learn not only from our 6 laureates, but also through their sharing, we learn how to promote the science, engaging our fundamental science, translate it into applications, benefit humankind, but at the same time, in this difficult climate, how we can work together as a world community of science. So let me wish, and let me first of all thank our laureates to travel to this part of the world in Hong Kong. And for your information, Hong Kong has ambition to really set up Hong Kong not only as a science hub, but also education hub for the world. We believe Hong Kong can be a scientific bridge to bridge the collaboration between China and the rest of the world. Actually, some of the countries are delinked for collaborations and for the scientific research. We in Hong Kong, Hong Kong U, we want to bridge these collaborations, even though not many areas that can be collaborate, but we are ambitious to bridge this. And our teachers and students and our researchers, scientists, are really keen to collaborate with Europe, with America, with Japan, with many other parts of the world. And Hong Kong will be a link, will be a bridge, scientific bridge to the world. And let me wish this forum great success, and many of you enjoy this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Zhang. Please be seated. Next, we would like to invite Mr. K.K. Chan, the Chief Secretary for Administration of the Government of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, to say a few words. Mr. Chan, please.
Dr. Wang, Professor Zhang, Mr. Turner, distinguished Nobel laureates, esteemed scientists, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. And it is my great pleasure to join you today for the Nobel Heroes Forum, Shaping Science and Future. To our Nobel laureates, we are truly privileged to have you with us. You represent the very best of human curiosity and perseverance. Your groundbreaking work expands our understanding of the universe, lights the path for future discovery, and inspires generations. Thank you for joining this extraordinary gathering. And to all our distinguished guests from around the world, a very warm welcome to Hong Kong. Today's dialogue is more than an academic event. It is a powerful convergence of the world's finest scientific minds, right here in a city that is determined to play its part in global innovation. Hong Kong's mission is clear and unwavering: to become a premier international innovation and technology center, a hub where top scientists, scholars, and entrepreneurs can thrive, collaborate, and serve the world. To achieve this, The government is fully committed. We are building a world-class ecosystem and nurturing the talent to power it. First, we are building the infrastructure for greatness. We have established a strategic I&T framework centered on 3 major I&T parks and 5 key research and development institutions. Building on the success of the Science Park and Cyberport, we officially launched the Hong Kong Park of the Hetao Shenzhen Hong Kong Science and Technology Innovation Cooperation Zone last month. The Hetao Cooperation Zone is a major cooperation platform in the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau Greater Bay Area under the National 14th Five-Year Plan. And the Hong Kong Park is envisioned as a world-class hub for technological innovation, connecting the Chinese mainland with the international community and serving as an important source for fostering new quality productive forces. Together with our 5 key R&D institutions focused on frontier technologies, these developments will create more favorable conditions for Hong Kong to attract global I&T resources and talent. Second, we are investing decisively. We back our words with resources. We have launched significant funding schemes across the entire innovation chain. To support excellent and impactful research, the Research Grants Council under the University Grants Committee administers more than 20 competitive research grant and fellowship schemes. Furthermore, last year we launched the $3 billion Hong Kong Frontier Technology Research Support Scheme to empower groundbreaking basic research led by the world-class researchers and academics. To accelerate the mainstream and downstream development, we roll out 3 separate $10 billion Hong Kong initiatives to drive the commercialization of R&D outcomes and new industrialization. Third, and most crucially, we are nurturing and attracting top talent. Talent is our ultimate driving force. We are expanding our talent pool through multiple strategies. On nurturing young research talent, the Hong Kong has launched the Young Collaborative Research Grant to support early-stage researchers in leading and managing cooperative research. We are also actively fostering research collaboration between Hong Kong, the Chinese mainland, and overseas research funding agencies through operating various joint research schemes. These partnerships not only foster academic exchange, but also provide opportunities to nurture researchers in exploring new frontiers in their respective fields. On attracting global talent, the RGC Junior Research Fellow Scheme has supported some 300 doctoral graduates from Hong Kong and around the world to pursue research careers at our universities. Our international research flagship, the Inno-Hong Kong Research Clusters, is also there to bring together brilliant minds from all over the world to conduct world-class scientific research. To date, our 2 existing Inno-Hong Kong Research Clusters, one focusing on healthcare technology and another on AI and robotics, have successfully built links with over 30 world-class universities and research institutes from 12 economies, pulling together around 3,000 researchers locally and across the globe. To go further, the government is now expediting the development of the 3rd Inno-Hong Kong Research Cluster with the focus on sustainable development, energy, advanced manufacturing, and materials. Our strategies follow a powerful cycle, promoting technology with talent, leading industries with technology, and attracting talent with industries. And we are seeing results. Hong Kong ranks 3rd globally in technology in the World Digital Competitiveness Ranking. The Shenzhen Hong Kong Guangzhou cluster ranks 1st in the 2025 Global Innovation Index ranking of the world's top 100 innovation clusters. Our startup community has grown nearly 5-fold in the past decade, producing homegrown unicorns. This progress is no accident. It is built on Hong Kong's unique strengths. Under one country, two systems, we enjoy unwavering national support and unparalleled global connectivity. Our robust rule of law, free-flowing capital, and vibrant multicultural society make Hong Kong the perfect incubator for scientific exploration and technological breakthroughs. To every scientist, researchers, and innovator here today, Hong Kong is open for you. We provide the platform, the funding, the freedom, and the connections to turn visionary ideas into reality. We invite you to build your legacy here, to join us in shaping not just the future of Hong Kong, but the future of science for humanity. On this note, let the dialogue begin. I look forward to the fruitful and inspirational exchanges. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chan. We truly appreciate your support and presence today. Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, next, it is our pleasure to have Mr. Nicholas Turner, the Executive Director of the Foundation Lindau Nobel Laureate Meetings with us today. Let's welcome him to give us an overview and update on the Lindau Nobel Laureate Meetings. Mr. Turner, please.
Distinguished guests of this event, just to make sure that I'm not doing any mistakes by pronouncing the people in the wrong way or the wrong matter, I just want to welcome all of you inclusively, and I hope for your understanding. So I'm really honored to be here on behalf of the Lindau Nobel Laureate Meetings and Countess Bettina Bernadotte, and I think now there should be a short movie, but well, otherwise yeah.
As the COVID-19 pandemic has shown, international collaboration among scientists is critical. But that's nothing new. The Lindau Nobel Laureate Meeting has been bringing together scientists from around the world since 1951. Back then, in the fallout of World War II, the idea of scientists working together was not taken for granted. Indeed, many feared the exact opposite. In Lindau, Franz Karl Hein and Gustav Wilhelm Parad came up with the idea of bringing together researchers and Nobel laureates from across Europe. They aimed to bring an end to Germany's scientific isolation. The two physicians approached Swedish royal family member Count Lennart Bernadotte to become a co-founder. He showed great enthusiasm for their idea and brought in his valuable contacts and support. Count Lennart became president of the council. He would come to significantly influence the following decade's meetings. In 1987, he was succeeded by his wife, Countess Sonia, who focused on internationalizing participation. And in 2008, their daughter, Countess Bettina, became president of the council. The new millennium brought several landmark events. The first interdisciplinary meeting was held, and the Foundation Lindau Nobel Laureate Meetings was established through 50 Nobel laureates in memory of Count Lennart. Activities today include the Lindau Science Trail, also aimed at young researchers, the Lindau Mediathek with free online educational materials, the Lindau Alumni Network, the Platform Mentoring Hub, and the Lindau exhibitions, such as the Nobel Portraits and the Sketches of Science. In the age of global challenges, the mission of the Lindau Nobel Laureate Meetings lives on. Educating, inspiring, and connecting is more important and relevant than ever. 70 years ago, the founders had a dream, and that dream endures in the scientists and Nobel laureates of the future.
So, as we believe, then a picture tells more than 1,000 words. You've already got a quick glimpse of the Lindau meetings that take place every year at the end of June at Lake Constance, which is at the corner between Germany, Switzerland, and Austria. Not to forget Liechtenstein, as we have the former minister with us. So it's a call in the center of Central Europe, so to say. I'm honored to be here to present the Lindau meetings, and my thanks go first and foremost to the Nobel laureates that are not only here today, but that also attend the Lindau meetings to make them possible. Without Nobel laureates, there would be no interactions with young scientists, and every year we have about 600 from about 90 to 100 countries coming, best of their countries, talents, best talents that on a multi-step preview and selection process are selected to have the chance to meet face-to-face and very closely with the Nobel laureates that in this context I really like to describe as the rock stars of their disciplines, because sometimes they are not so known to the public, more to their disciplines, but they are very similar to rock stars or football stars, and I do believe they deserve the same attention. So I just want to mention two persons in this auditorium that are crucial for us to be here today. It's our ambassador for Hong Kong and the Chinese Bay Area, Michael Ong, that really made it possible with his colleagues that we are here. And so the first and most important link to Hong Kong for us. And then I have to mention Peter Badke, because he is traveling the world to take these portraits of Nobel laureates around the world. And without his exhibitions, there would be no reason for us from Lindau to reach out except looking for best talents to come to Lindau. But with this traveling exhibition that is now in Hong Kong and will tour on afterwards, well, it makes all this happen. So thank you, Peter, that we are now for 25 years almost married, his project, our project, and the meetings. So, as I mentioned, we have about 600 young scientists coming to Lindau every year, so there are alumni all over, and very proudly earlier, or at the end of last year, I mean it's still close as we are at the beginning of January, last year we just have, since last year we have the third Nobel laureate that attended Lindau as a young scientist to then later on was able to travel to Stockholm. And we are, of course, we are proud of this, and I'm pretty sure there will be more to come. And there's one other story that we like to share, because it's a Nobel laureate that shares it with the young scientist when he comes to Lindau. He normally welcomes the young ones in the auditorium in Lindau and says, well, you're so lucky, you are a young scientist and you are here in Lindau. You know, I had to go via Stockholm because his professor believed at that time that it would not be worthwhile to send him to Lindau. So now he's coming regularly, coming back as a Nobel laureate, and that's the only way you can come again. A young scientist has this chance once in his lifetime, but if they get the Nobel Prize, they can come back again. So might be a dream for you to go for. No, the Lindau Nobel Laureate meetings are not so much about facts and latest discoveries, but more about the story of the laureates on how they reached it. And just yesterday, I discussed with Professor Wüthrich that if you're not prepared to fail, you will never get close to these achievements that a Nobel laureate reached, because getting to a goal, there are 1,000 or even 1,000,000 failures on the way, and you really need to be convinced if you fall, stand up again, go on. And you will listen to Kurt Wüthrich and his colleagues later on. His way of making it happen, what was not really known, what will it be, really had sleepless nights, long nights in the lab, and well-organized family life, close to the lab, in the lab, and aside of it. So these experiences really are what should be the inspiring moment of the meetings with laureates, encounters and exchanges. So in Lindau we have different formats. There are science walks, there are Nobel laureate lunches, there are lectures, there are Agora talks, there are moderated sessions and lectures, Q&As and things like that. So whoever is in the age of a young scientist, be it a student, a PhD student or a postdoc, do not miss to apply, and we are looking forward to see you in Lindau. So I think Michael Ong is our liaison person, so to say, and he and we will be happy to exchange cards or whatever information you need. There is a website, but I don't want to bother you with all that now. You are looking forward to see and hear and listen to the Nobel laureates, and I'm just leaving again. So thank you for having the interest in it. Thank you for being here, and enjoy the day.
Thank you, Mr. Turner, for sharing these fascinating insights regarding the Lindau Nobel Laureate Meetings. Please be seated. To commemorate today's event, and as a token of our appreciation and admiration, we have prepared a special calligraphy souvenir for each Nobel laureate, created by HKU's talented students. Each piece reflects the laureate's remarkable contribution to science and humanity. May I invite Professor Xiang Zhang to join us on stage and present the souvenirs. Professor Zhang, please. Our first recipient is Professor Ferenc Krausz. Professor Krausz, please join us on stage. To Professor Krausz, we present Zi Shen Yan Zi, or delve deeply to grasp subtleties. Originating from the Book of Changes, this phrase highlights a deep importance investigation into the most intricate mysteries and finest details of a subject. Our next recipient is Professor Konstantin Novoselov. Professor Novoselov, please join us on stage. To Professor Novoselov, we present 大道至简, or great truths are simple. Lao Tzu's teaching in Tao Te Ching tells us that the most fundamental truths are pure and unadorned. This reflects a profound wisdom. The deepest principles manifest in the simplest forms. Our next recipient is Professor Kurt Wüthrich. Professor Wüthrich, please join us on stage. To Professor Wüthrich, we present 识微智着, or discernment through minutiae. Adapted from the teachings of Han Feizi, this phrase describes how wise individuals can discern broad truths from fine details. Our next recipient is Professor Louis J. Ignarro. Professor Ignarro, please join us on stage. To Professor Ignarro, we present 感而遂通, or enlightenment through sensibility. Another phrase found in the Book of Changes, it describes wisdom achieved through perceptive insight and understanding. It inspires a future where science and intuition unite to unravel life's deeper mysteries. Our next recipient is Professor Tim Hunt. Professor Hunt, please join us on stage. To Professor Hunt, we present 格物探源, or investigating the principle of things. Originating from the title of a 19th century scientific treatise, this phrase integrates the Confucian principle of investigating things to attain knowledge from the great learning with the empirical approach of Western science. Our final recipient is Professor Robert C. Merton. Professor Merton, please join us on stage. To Professor Merton, we present 数语理解, or the harmony of mathematics and science. Articulated by Mei Wending, a prominent mathematician of early Qing dynasty, this phrase posits that just as mathematics and science depend on precise evidence, good governance is founded on moral principles. Thank you, Professor Zhang and Professor Merton. Please remain where you are. I would now like to ask our other Nobel laureates to come to the center of the stage for a group photo. Thank you once again, Professor Zhang and our Nobel laureates. Please remain where you are. Next, we would like to invite our distinguished guests for another group photo. Please join us on stage, Mr. K.K. Chan, Dr. Peter Wong, Mr. Nicholas Turner, Professor Gong Peng, Professor Wang Yang, Professor Jay Siegel, Professor C.S. Lau, and Professor Ying Xiaobo. Thank you all. Please return to your seats. Now, we'd love to take a group photo with all of you, our esteemed guests, colleagues, and friends. Our photographer will be at stage ready to capture this joyful moment. Thank you all. Please join me in a round of applause to celebrate these inspiring individuals and the meaningful connections we've made today. Ladies and gentlemen, we are deeply honored to have the presence of Mr. K.K. Chan, the Chief Secretary for Administration of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region of our event today. Mr. Chan will need to leave us at this time due to another official commitment. Let us express our heartfelt gratitude for his attendance and support. Please join me in thanking Mr. Chan once again. Without any further ado, we are delighted to move on to our first panel discussion titled Building the Future, From Molecule to Materials. This panel brings together laureates whose discoveries relate to identifying, understanding, and creating fundamental structures. Please join me in welcoming our panelists, Professor Ferenc Krausz, Professor Konstantin Novoselov, Professor Kurt Wüthrich, and Professor Xiang Zhang as a moderator for this session.
Let me welcome our three distinguished laureates on stage. And also, I guess this is the first session. There will be a second session with other laureates as well. This session, we have three distinguished physicists and chemists. And their discoveries from Professor Ferenc Krausz. He's the expert making the shortest laser pulse, and that's called attosecond. And how short it is. You use this light to shining on any of the small objects, let's say electrons or ions. When they move, he can take a movie of that. And that is unprecedented before his discovery. So his discovery won the Nobel Prize, actually creating the laser pulse, the shortest pulse ever. And that is very critical for the physics, chemistry, and any materials studies and so on. And Professor Konstantin, his discoveries on the graphene, the two-dimensional materials. Many of you, actually, our young student probably use the pencils to write the letters and so on. But when you write the letters with a pencil, that graphite materials, the black, the center part of the materials, actually on the paper, if you use a microscope, magnify, it's layers of materials laid down on the paper. His discovery is that each of these layers, has a very unique physics property that you can build a semiconductor, superconductor out of it, and he will tell some of us. So that discovery is from toys experiment that using Scotch tape to peel off the layers. But he's the first one in the whole human history did that. Many of us use pencils when we are small, but we never discovered that. He was one. But that one now is translating billion-dollar industry now for chemical industry, for semiconductor, for many other applications. Professor Wüthrich, that if I pronounce correctly, bear with me if I pronounce wrong. His discovery using nuclear magnetic resonance to discover using this as a special tool to monitoring the spin of electrons or nucleus in the materials that can discover various of chemistry, physics, and also in the biological cells as well. So that is very profound discovery. Anyhow, so we will probably begin with some of their sharing of their discoveries and how that moment of eureka moment, that when they discover that, of course, is big excitement. But I'm more curious to know, and as many of our young students here, that before you discover that, there must be hours, if not years of hard work. In science, we say you spend 95% at least of time doing things, fail things. You don't succeed. But only last 5% of time you succeed. And you write down the articles, papers, and publish. But could you share with us what are the struggles or failures you have experienced before reaching that 5% of moment? Any of you want to start? Friends?
Well, thank you. This is certainly a very good and very central question. I would say before we even start moving ahead, the very first thing that we should give a lot of thoughts to what is the right question we want to address, and we want actually to answer at the end of the day, or probably at the end of a long journey, because this very question will be really, really critical when we are moving ahead. I think it's quite typical of scientific research that we bump into things that was not planned, and which appears very interesting, and which actually kind of provokes to take a closer look. But the danger is that if we succumb to temptation too many times, and to look at all these things that we bump into on the way, that it distracts us, and this just slows down progress towards answering that big question we asked at the beginning very much. So each time when we bump into such a thing, we should ask ourselves, if we try to answer it, if you try to solve this problem that we encountered, is it going to bring us forward towards answering that big question? If yes, of course, we should look at it. If no, leave it and just continue moving ahead. I think this is extremely important to be eventually able to achieve something that has a kind of breakthrough character. The other thing that we had to learn, and which is, I think, also very important, to learn not experience if we fail with some attempt to solve a problem and to take the next step, not experience this as a failure in a conventional sense. Because even if we don't succeed, it teaches us something. And in quite a few cases, I think there have been quite a few examples for this in the past, not just in our laboratory or in our own experience, but also in other fields. Such a failure may enforce us to actually rethink the whole approach that we have chosen, and at some points it may enforce us or may prompt us to actually take a different route, which we otherwise wouldn't have taken if we keep making incremental progress, and we feel quite happy. Oh, okay, well, it looks like we are moving ahead, but maybe much later we will find out that this was not the right way. So a failure always offers a chance, and it took me quite some energy and time and efforts to actually infect my whole group with this kind of attitude, to not understand a failure as a failure in a conventional sense, but always see this as a chance for rethinking and maybe take a route which eventually will get us to our goal.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with Franz, but I probably would take it even more radical. So you see, if you use these words like struggle and failure, then probably you are in the wrong profession, because if you feel that you are struggling, then it's something wrong with what you are doing. So you need to enjoy the process as much as the result, and the process is split into solving small immediate problems, and you just sometimes they're theoretical. You need to take your pencil if you want, or a pen, and do some calculations on the piece of paper. Sometimes you need to solve some engineering problems and go and solder something, or just build a new device. But it should be part of the process, and you need to enjoy it. And I'm not saying that we're all masochists who just who enjoy the failure, but it's part of the discovery. And unfortunately, the only way forward is if you enjoy this process of continuous solving and overcoming those obstacles. That's the profession of a scientist.
My field is in the study of the biological macromolecules like proteins and nucleic acids. The early history of these classes of molecules is linked to the red protein in our blood, hemoglobin. The first Nobel Prize in structural biology was awarded for structural studies of hemoglobin. Now, I was in sports at the age of most of yours, and oxygen uptake was a limiting factor to my getting on the Olympic team. I never made it. So when I joined Built Telephone Laboratories, so a company that worked on telephones, I took my blood out of my left arm and studied my hemoglobin. I was immediately quite famous for what we saw in my hemoglobin. And that was in 1968, and I thought we had now the method in hand to determine structures of these molecules of life that we like to refer to in situ, that is, in solution where they were, and at body temperature. 6 years later, we were stuck, and when you get stuck, you write books. So I wrote a book, and writing this book about the field, I discovered that we were completely on the wrong way. That was in 1976. Then we somehow survived, and within 2 years, we recognized what the right way would be. From there on, we employed dozens of physicists, mostly mathematical physicists, to produce the informatics tools that we needed to handle the data that were needed to achieve the goal that I had dreamed about in 1968. This was completed in 1984, and then nobody believed that it could be done. Whereupon I had to go back skiing for 2 years and write another book. But this time it was a book about the success, and that is still on the market. So you see, you have to have some stamina. You have to live through difficult times when you realize you are on the wrong way, but you shouldn't give up, continue, and find the right way.
Thank you for all your very insightful sharing. Now, as we know that doing science today compared with 100 years ago or 400 years ago, when Newton started his own science, observed apple falling from the tree, discovered gravity and so on. Today world, of course, we have much more modern tools, computers, instruments, and so on. But at the same time, we are also, society knows today compared with 100 years ago. The science is useful, is benefiting our life and so on. But at the same time, us, the society, be more aware of the positive impact of science. Their demands also are coming up as well. When the governments, whether European government, the US, or even this part of the world, give us a grant, we want to have a very formulated KPI and so on. You have to do this, do that. And therefore, there's actually, of course, I mean, taxpayers' money is very important when we spend it. We want to generate positive impact in applications and usefulness way. But at the same time, a lot of science discovery, as you know that, in the beginning, is actually explored by the curiosity, by answering big questions. For example, putting the man in the moon. That question is unrelated with any of immediate application to our daily life and so on. So how you view, scientific discoveries in your career, and also your advice to our young scientists here, that how we move forward. Now, of course, the world is changing now in the context of more demanding for doing useful stuff, useful applications, and so on. But as you know that for a lot of scientific discoveries, in the beginning, you don't know where you are going, right? So could you share some of your insights on that?
Well, thank you. This is truly excellent question, and one could spend probably hours to elaborate on this. I think it is, for us scientists, it is a big responsibility to keep telling political decision makers how important fundamental science, curiosity-driven science is. In many countries, I see that there is a tendency to kind of reshuffle funding more and more from fundamental research towards applied, as you put it, more useful research, where the benefit is much more obvious. But I think there are countless examples for how actually curiosity-driven research has spawned really, really big breakthroughs, which led to disruptive innovation and which actually changed our life. So I think this is truly the hallmark of curiosity-driven research. It is the only human activity, in my view, which offers the potential for breakthrough discoveries, which are often not well predictable. Just to give an example from my own research, we started working on advancing laser technology with a very specific aim. We wanted to answer the question, and I told you before, things start with asking the right question. So the question I posed at the beginning of the 90s to myself and my research group, well, some 70 years before, a famous person called Erwin Schrödinger, who was also active in Vienna, where we were active with my group at that time as well, discovered his famous equation, which was kind of the foundation, together with the theory of Heisenberg, which is an alternative formulation, the foundation of quantum theory, of quantum physics. And by solving that equation, people figured out very quickly, just within months after this equation was published, that electrons are supposed to move on the atomic scale within attoseconds. All kinds of motion, oscillatory migration, and things like that. This came out as a solution of that equation. But no one was in a position, even 70 years later, when I started kind of my career, to actually to capture these motions. So I asked just a simple question: is this feasible? Is this feasible to do this experimentally, to see this motion eventually? And this was it. I mean, we did not give too much thought to what this may be good for later on, which might influence our life perhaps, just to try to answer this question. And once we managed to do so, about 10 years later, all of a sudden it turned out that this very technology, which we developed for answering this question, and eventually we were able to answer this question in the affirmative, this same technology, namely attosecond metrology, is able to capture also the oscillations of visible and infrared light. And then another 10 years later, we figured out that capturing the oscillations of infrared light all of a sudden provides us access to the molecular composition of human blood. And we started research on that, and that's actually one of the reasons why I'm here, and I joined Hong Kong U, because I think that if we team up with the institutions I'm working with in Europe, in Budapest and Munich, and now in Hong Kong, we may be able to develop the first screening algorithm of the world, which will be able to capture very serious chronic diseases like cancer, like cardiovascular conditions, like COPD, like diabetes, at a much earlier stage than diagnosis of these diseases is possible today, and this way save millions of lives. So it was absolutely impossible to foresee this kind of development in the 90s when we started doing research towards capturing electrons. Thank you.
Yeah, if anything, I would definitely encourage people to do the useless research. There is enough people who would turn it useful, but it's quite an art how to make the useless research. It's because there are no recipes for how to turn a discovery into an applications. There are books written, and so any smart CEO would tell you a pathway how to turn it into a commercial product, but no one is actually can tell you how to make a discovery. It's a mystery of a human brain, unfortunately, and it's you can't learn it. So you just have to experience it and try to replicate. But so that they say that any fundamental research is basically an applied research, which appeared a few decades too early. I don't really like it, but it is actually true, because any application you take actually contains inside dozens and dozens of fundamental breakthroughs which have been accumulated over decades or even centuries. And I would like to argue that fundamental research got a value in its own. So I think it's part of the human nature that we're fundamentally curious, and it's a fundamental necessity for us to learn more and more. It's the same as breathing and drinking and eating. So just learning new things is a fundamental nature of our species. It turns out that it's also useful for applications, but I think it is really secondary.
On the plane from Singapore to Hong Kong, I watched a French movie. And at a certain stage, late in the movie, a mature woman in her 60s, said, il vaut mieux regretter des choses qu'on a fait que des choses qu'on n'a pas osé de faire. In English, it is better to regret things you have done in your life than things that you did not dare to do. And that is true in science. Do not let yourself being hindered from doing what you think you should do next. Don't have artificial intelligence tell you not to do things that your natural intelligence indicates that you should do. This will keep you happy, and as long as you are happy in your work, you don't lose time. Even if you fail, it has been worthwhile.
So, Professor Walsh, you really brought a very interesting point. Now, we all know that, all the audience know that, we're now also, the other horizontal challenge and vertical challenge besides the geopolitics is the AI. Now, AI is coming. We know that in human history, we invent a lot of things through science, cars, airplanes, whatever. But this is the first time. So you can view cars and airplanes are the human physical extension. You're running faster now, you can fly with your fixed wing, and so on. But this is the first time AI, computer chips, reach to the stage that actually can be faster than our brain. And this is in 1,000 years, a human being actually never experienced this before. So I read a lot of things, our computer science professor educated me and so on. AI is powerful and it's going to be really impact a lot of things. So I want to ask you three laureates. You actually made the discovery 10 years ago, 30 years ago. We, including myself, I'm a scientist too. We use the old-fashioned scientist way in the laboratory, doing by our hands. We use our brain and so on. Now, there's a big topic of AI for science. Essentially, the scientist now has this AI agent can help them to do discoveries faster, quicker, and so on. And now, that's okay. It's just like we have a car, have a bicycle. We can run faster. But now, what do you think that human creativity will play in the future? That with AI now, they are running much faster, and some of them now shows the future of AI has certain, actually, way of doing things more than human. Can you share with us and the audience and young students that how AI will impact science and how we as a scientist will do our profession as an old-fashioned or maybe a new way running bicycle?
I think AI will accelerate scientific progress, and no question about that, as it accelerates progress in probably most areas of life. But I don't think that it will replace humans in scientific research, at least not in a very, very near or even foreseeable future. I fully agree with Konstantin. This is a mystery of human brain. I would disagree with him that this is unfortunate. I think this is fortunate for us scientists to not be replaced by AI, at least hopefully very soon. I think, I mean, my vision is that AI will greatly unload us in terms of doing routine things with which we used to waste a lot of time. This can be largely accelerated, which can which can help us to kind of save more time for doing what AI, at least these days, is unable to do, namely creative thinking. And I think that's how we should exploit AI as much as possible. So we should not fear it, we should not flee from it, we should utilize it as much as possible. But at the same time, we should not expect AI to do the creative part of thinking for us. That should be reserved for us.
I don't think we need to be particularly scared about AI. So the technology, either computer or any other technologies, been helping us to speed up our research over the decades. So something which would take me, I don't know, a month to measure during my PhD. So my students can do it within hours these days. So so this progress been there for forever. AI is quite a specific technology, and it's for sure it's here to stay, and it does work, and it's going to revolutionize the way how we do many different things. Whether it's going to replace scientists or not, of course, everyone is worried about this. My personal view that it probably won't. I haven't got 100% proof, but I've got my own reasoning and rationale why it won't happen, because first of all, we don't know how the discoveries are made. So you take Nobel laureates, or you take any scientist in this audience, and all of them have got a different story how the discovery happened. So there is. You would like to make a pattern, but unfortunately I don't think there is a pattern. So just the only common things there is that you work hard, and you basically try to work in the most exciting area, and then incidentally somehow one day there is a discovery is happening. So, but there are no universal rules and universal recipes. So discoveries are always, it's a rare event, it's a phase transition, so it changes the structure of our understanding of nature, of the universe. And because it is a rare event, I think it's very difficult to predict, and I think it would be difficult for AI to routinely make discoveries. I really hope it's going to be reserved for the human brain rather than for the artificial brain.
Well, you mentioned that we were doing our work with old-fashioned methods. I need to claim that when we did our work, these methods were not old-fashioned. They were at the frontier. And the most important difference between doing the kind of work that I'm involved in the 1960s and 70s and today is the development of computing abilities. In the 1970s, there was no computer that could draw a molecule. You wouldn't believe it, but that's the truth. So we had to have artists to prepare paintings of our results. That was until about 1982, when the first software was developed, in part in my laboratory, that could draw molecules. That's not very long ago. The kind of work that's being typically done by AI would be referred to as bean counting. AI is bean counting on a very high level. Now, you mentioned the word creative AI. As long as you count beans, you are not likely to be creative. We know, but this is the real power of AI, to efficiently count beans. We now have chairs at CTH who work on creative AI. I just listened to a lecture by one of my colleagues at the meeting in Singapore, and I'm still doubtful that we will have reliable and sensitive creative AI. But I think this is, so it's a threat to me that this will happen. It may happen. But I think that's right the point where we are now. And 10 years from now, you'll talk about 2025 as an old-fashioned period of time.
So that's a very, very interesting comment. And that brings us, gives us more confidence on human creativity, human ability to create a world in the future and so on. So talk about creativity. We, as university students, teachers, we pass the knowledge to students and so on. And we also try to be creative in classroom, in the laboratory as well. Now today, our Nobel Laureate Forum, most of you are scientists, except one economist. We don't have Nobel Laureate in literature today, but I'd like to ask this question because you brought the issue of creativity. And in University of Hong Kong, we are a comprehensive university. Half of the campus teach humanity, arts, law, business, and other creative things. I'd like to ask you, as a top scientist, in your scientific career, and how actually your exposure to humanity, study history, arts, or whatever, music, have any influence on your career, your discovery, and so on. And that's part one. Part two is how you envision in the future university education, how the humanity can help or interact with the science that help us to prepare the next generation of scholars, whether they are scientists or artists, that to help to advance the human civilization. So 2 parts: your experience and your vision.
Well, this is a very, very good question. I cannot recapitulate that my interest for art would have directly influenced kind of my way and my journey in my career, but I do see a very strong connection between the two fields. Certainly the frequently used term creativity in the last round is the kind of common denominator between these two fields. Being great in science, achieving something important with great potential or real impact requires a great deal of creativity, and so does achieving something very special, something very new, something spectacular in art. So I think this is where probably both fields can cross-fertilize each other most in terms of creative thinking, and I'm sure we can learn a lot from artists about how they come up with an idea which they eventually implement as a painting, as a sculpture, how they even started. And again, probably there is some similarity, as I said before. We have to start our work, our journey, always with asking the right question. So one way or the other, an artist also has to come up with a question or with a goal. Okay, this is what I would like to, this is the message I would like to convey with the next piece of my art, and now I just start thinking how I can do this in the best possible way. So I think there is a lot of similarities, and I think interactions between both fields can be very, very beneficial, and this is one of the big advantages of a big university like Hong Kong U, that here basically all these fields and their famous representatives are around, and we should just talk to each other. I think this is beneficial for both sides.
Yeah, just to expand it a little bit more. So I do paint. So I studied Chinese calligraphy in Xiamen, and so I try to do a little bit of the artistic work as well, but maybe not very good, but at least not as good as my science. But I do enjoy it, and unfortunately, there is no immediate influence. I cannot say that I go and paint something and then next day I do some breakthrough in my physics. Sorry, there are no such connections. But it actually taught me one thing, that there are this unpredictability of the discovery. I cannot, so that's something which I learned, which really I vividly learned from my art, that I cannot plan to paint a masterpiece. So I cannot just come in the morning and say, okay, today so it's going to be my best ever painting. Unfortunately, it doesn't work this way. And in the same way, it doesn't work that you go into the lab and say, okay, I'll make a discovery today. So you cannot plan. But what you can do, you can maximize your chances, and there are each of the scientists got their own ways how to increase the chances for the discovery, or increase the chances to paint a masterpiece. So like there was a Russian physicist, Nobel Laureates from, I can't remember, 33 maybe Kapitsa in superfluid helium-4, and for him there was a simple recipe. So he would be saying 1 order lower in temperature, a new effect, a new discovery. So, but other people have got their own ways. So, but something which was very, very useful for me is this realization that even though you cannot plan a discovery, you cannot plan a masterpiece, but there are ways how to set your brain on the right track to increase those chances. Whether we should change the way how do we educate students, I'm sure we should. I think we should mixing. So I think the way how we divide the science into disciplines is a bit artificial and maybe even outdated now, because I run an institute in Singapore, and we have mathematicians, computer scientists, biologists, chemists, physicists, material scientists, you name it. So people work at the cross-disciplinary, at the borders between all those disciplines. Actually, I help a friend of mine a few years ago. He bought a university in Germany, and it was I was telling him it's the worst possible purchase you can ever make. So just to buy a university is the worst possible business you can run. He didn't listen. So now a few years on, so he actually said, okay, you're right, but okay, you already bought it, so we need to play with it. So and the way how we're trying to, so I try to help him, try to consult him on things, and the way we try to think to turn things around is actually go away from the traditional break of science into the disciplines. But maybe you can think about that mathematics and physics together. You can do the quantum computing. So that's or if you mix chemistry and physics, you do material science. So something which is more relevant to today's world. whether you would throw some art and literature and history there. I mean, those are exciting disciplines, and I would definitely vote for this. I'm not sure what would come at the cross border between mathematics, physics, and literature, and I'm sure some new discipline would definitely appear.
Well, on a very general level, having had positions in 4 continents and being introduced to the cultures in these 4 continents is a very important part of the lives of my wife and myself. Now, specifically, I mentioned previously that during the first 20 years of my actively working in structural biology, we had our results presented by artists. We would sit together with artists, they would see our data, and they would transform our data, which were either a pile of numbers or density maps and so on, into beautiful paintings. So we had this relation, and even today, when they are produced by computers, the images of biological macromolecules are a beauty to see. On another line, one of the outgrowths of our work is magnetic resonance imaging in the hospitals. This is what we did 50 years ago to start. When you experience an MRI investigation on yourself, you will notice that this is very noisy still. You have very heavy noise during the recording of your magnetic resonance image of the head, primarily other parts of the body. And in order to help you survive this noise, you'll be given headphones, and then you can choose to listen to Mozart or Armstrong or some other artists. And there you again have a very direct connection between the result of our work and art, in this case, music.
Very interesting. So I guess all the science over 100 years, we enjoy the international collaborations, and that is actually one of the major forces. As you mentioned, you live in or you work in the 4 continents and really across different cultures and so on. And 20 years ago, collaboration across the continent is not a problem at all. But today, these present a challenge because of geopolitics and so on. But we all know, so-called scientists always say, the science has no border. Because whatever you discover in Europe, you're discovering the magnetic resonance now benefit even Hong Kong or Japan, mainland China. We use MRI for medical imaging, diagnostics, and so on. Everybody benefits. But the science advancement is also really depend on how we collaborate, how we disseminate the knowledge from one place to the other place, right? And so I'd like to invite you to share some of your view or advice on, in today's climate, somewhat difficult, but yet there's a lot of emerging human challenges, as I mentioned in my opening remark. Human health, food shortage of water, food, energy, materials, and so on. So how your envision and your advice on, especially to our young scientists, we can work together across the border and to work towards a common discovery of science and benefit to the human society and so on. Any insight or advice, please?
Well, I think international collaboration is again another hallmark of science, as you nicely emphasized. Science has no borders, and whatever we invent, we discover, this is supposed to belong to entire humankind, and should we should make sure, together with all others who can contribute, of course, again, policymakers, to actually exploit each and every scientific discovery and invention in the best possible way to the benefit of humankind. And I think we scientists have a big responsibility in this. By going a bit beyond just going every day in the lab, doing our research, trying to get it published, and then we are happy and take the next step. So first of all, if we set up international collaborations, this will benefit our own research in the first place. So we should have our own interest for our own research to do this. In many cases, actually, most innovations these days happen at the border, basically at the interface of between different disciplines in interdisciplinary settings. So it is definitely advisable that we reach out and look for exciting questions, exciting applications for what we have developed, or exciting questions that are out there to basically which we can contribute, possibly with our knowledge. And on the other hand, even if other groups are working on a very similar in a very similar field, and we would think that there is nothing much we can learn from them, if they do this at a completely different location, in a very different cultural environment, their approach to addressing problems, to try to solve problems, will be probably different, from which we may learn. And this again would be very beneficial. So these are just very general comments. In my own field of research, which I already mentioned before, we have started using the physical metrology that we developed for something completely different, driven just purely by curiosity. We have started using it for a very specific medical applications. We had to set up collaborations with groups from medicine, first in Munich, then in Hungary. This was quite cumbersome, actually. It required quite some effort because we had to create actually a language with which we could communicate with each other, physicians and physicists, computer scientists and physicians, and so on. And it did require quite some efforts, but it was worthwhile, even if it took years to eventually find common grounds. But this created an opportunity which I think is pretty unique. And after some time, we recognized that doing this just within Europe may not be enough, because eventually, if we want this method to be useful for instance, for the Asian population, at some point we will need to take the next step and basically try to test and validate this technology with blood samples, by using blood samples from Asian people to be able to prove that indeed this method is universal and can work everywhere. And that's how I ended up being here, and why actually exactly Hong Kong, because I truly believe that Hong Kong, that it's just not just an advertisement, what we hear here in many cases. I think this is the full truth, that Hong Kong is the gate to collaboration between West and East in general, based on the open society and also on the policy of the government here, and of course, thanks to the leadership of Hong Kong EU, is probably the flagship of these efforts. I have experienced this now over the past few months here, that the spirit to bring together knowledge from wherever this knowledge needs to be brought in to kind of come up with all the necessary prerequisites for being able to move ahead efficiently. I see one, so I mean, if you ask me what is my message to the students, well, my message to the students would be to be interested in this and take this chance to participate in such endeavors where scientists from Europe, from Asia are working together, because you will have the unique chance for learning as much as you can possibly learn about how to approach basically a problem, how to tackle a problem, how to formulate a question, how to solve problems, which may be basically the people from Europe may bring in some experience. People from Hong Kong U, from other Chinese universities who are here frequent collaboration partners may bring in. So you will have a unique opportunity to learn. Now, in terms of the challenge, I think one of the main challenge is, as you already mentioned, dear President Zhang, it appeared to be quite easy to collaborate a couple of decades ago, but unfortunately enough, it's becoming more and more challenging. There are obviously some influential political leaders who prefer to subdivide our planet to the Western Hemisphere and the Eastern Hemisphere. Obviously, an influential leader that is doing this has not read Einstein, who said already something like 70 years ago that it's nonsense to speak about West and East in terms of location. You can speak about West and East in terms of directions. That makes sense. I'm heading towards the East or towards the West. But speaking about West and East on a planet which has a shape of a sphere is just pure nonsense. Of course, this had a very deep political message, and I think this message could not be more actual than today. I think we are facing the danger that if a political leader speaks about the Western Hemisphere, as a next step, he might start speaking about trying to keep the knowledge acquired on this Western Hemisphere inside the Western Hemisphere and cut off the Eastern Hemisphere from this knowledge, which would be disastrous. And I think we scientists have a huge responsibility to step up, to join forces, and to raise our voice against this. Because any knowledge that we acquire, be it wherever in the world, belongs to whole humankind. And we should not get tired of actually reminding global leaders of this. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to echo here that knowledge is fundamentally belongs to the whole humanity rather than to a particular nation, to a particular scientist. It's like the air we breathe. Who owns the air? So it's the same. So the knowledge, and I think there is actually more fundamental, something more fundamental there than simply this statement that you could see that sometimes the discoveries do happen at the same time, simultaneously at different continents. So it's like there is some information field which is distributed through papers, through the experiments which we do, and then it just breaks through at the same time in many different labs, and that tells you that there shouldn't be, and I hope that fundamentally there is no boundaries for the knowledge. Maybe for technologies, but not for the fundamental knowledge. And it's quite easy to generate those knowledge, so there is no brainer. You only need one very simple component to do it, and this component is talents. And so I mean, you can think about maybe money, equipment, something else, but that's only how to attract those talents. But fundamentally, the only thing which you need is talents, and unfortunately those talents need a little bit of nudging, a bit of the kick of the asses, and maybe a bit of the persuasion, and that's why we create this idea of the critical mass, when talents stimulate each other, so you get this effect of 1 + 1 is greater than 2, and talents are distributed uniformly across the planet, so every nation would get same number of talents per capita, but so for years we had this talent mobility, which helped to create this quite sporadically centers of excellence and the critical masses in different locations of the earth, and that helped to push the science, the global science, forward. Now, if we have this effect of restricting the talent mobility, temporarily you could see that you amplify the science in this country or another country, but unfortunately globally, on the global scale, in the long term, you would slow down the development of science. So science fundamentally needs this talent mobility, formation of the local centers of excellence, and that pushes the scientific knowledge globally rather than locally.
I'm afraid that I should not really participate in this discussion, because I'm from a different time. See, today you are prepared everywhere across the world for international collaboration. We have a substance transfer unit in each organization where I am. So if I want to give a substance outside of my laboratory, I have to go to this organization. Then they will go to the patent office and make sure that the transfer of this substance should be allowed. And only when we go through all this, which may take a few months, can we apply for money to organize the international collaboration. See, 40 years ago, we were the only lab that could use my technology, for which I got the Nobel Prize. So we would exchange samples with everybody. I mean, that included collaborations with the Soviet Union, with Mexico, with the United States, with any country. I have about 300 outside collaborators on our publications from those times, and nobody ever worried about it. Nobody knew about this exchange and these discussions and the work that was going on, except for us who were doing the science. And now today you are prepared, you have all the organizations set up to do it, and I wish you luck.
Thank you, thank you. It's a very interesting and diverse views, of course, and that brought me to think about Mr. Toner's presentation about the Lindau Foundation and these meetings that actually it's a surprise, surprisingly to me that I learned this actually is starting from when Germany, after World War II, they tried to break up the scientific isolations of German science, or maybe overall the fragmented European science and with rest of the world, and that this Lindau Foundation set up these meetings traveling, link the scientists around the world, at least bring the scientists together. And that really brings back these forums really motivation that really the science, we need to work together and so on. Though we have many difficulties as we experienced right after World War II, the German science was isolated and somehow and so on. But anyway, I hope today's sharing, thank you very much for all your insightful comments and sharing. And I'm sure our audience, our students, colleagues enjoy this very, very much. Let's thank our panelists for their insight. Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. Let's move on to our second panel discussion titled Decoding Complexity, Regulating Systems from the Cell to the Global Economy. This session focuses on the discovery of key regulatory mechanisms in complex, dynamic systems. Please join me in welcoming our panelists, Professor Louis J. Ignarro, Professor Robert C. Merton, Professor Tim Hunt, and Professor Richard Wong, our Provost and Deputy Vice Chancellor, as a moderator for this session.
Okay, well, still good morning to all of you that are here, and I think you had a very productive session earlier this morning. So in order to get into the action as soon as possible, I'm not going to introduce anyone here. They are adequately represented in the digital photo up there, so we'll go directly to it. Today's session, this morning's session is Decoding Complexity, Regulating Systems from the Cell to the Global Economy. Now I can see that two of our laureates are in the area of medicine and physiology, where there's a lot of affinity. The other, Professor Merton, is in economics and finance, which I have a lot of affinity. I do not know whether there's any similarity between the two systems other than they are all very complex. We hope that they are somewhat self-regulating in certain, if the conditions are right, and they can self-regulate to create a benign outcome, and sometimes it fails. So I would like to start off the question without introducing any one of them, because I think you already know them from this morning's discussion. What do you think is the defining characteristic of the system you study in terms of whether the ability to self-regulate and without a lot of interference, and what will be, if it exists, system failure, system doesn't function? How would you characterize self-regulation versus system failure, if one could do that? Perhaps we can start from Hunt.
I think that's a really interesting question, actually, because I studied blood for a long time. We've already heard about hemoglobin from Kurt. And if you think about it, the concentration of blood cells is something that is regulated within very narrow limits in your body. Not enough blood, and your brain is starved of oxygen. Too much red blood cells, and your blood won't circulate, and you die, as some cyclists could find taking too much erythropoietin. So there's amazing regulatory systems, and it's the same throughout our body, actually. You know, I mean, it's always remarkable to me, I think, that your nose neither grows nor shrinks throughout your life. You have a completely new nose every 7 years. There isn't a single molecule in my nose that I was born with. And yet these cells somehow know, and they're constantly dying and shedding and turning over. The only thing apparently that doesn't turn over in your body is the collagen in your knees. Which partly explains. And do you know how that was found? This is remarkable. So somebody had to say, if you grew up and your knees were being made in the late 50s and early 60s, you would have breathed in some C14 carbon dioxide from the atomic weapons testing that was then done in the atmosphere. And so you got radioactively labeled collagen. And if you were growing up in that time, then your knees are still radioactive, and that's how they know. Everything else about your knees turns over, but not the collagen. Amazing. So we're in constant state of flux, and these regulatory feedback loops are all important, and we don't understand most of them very well, actually.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more about the cartilage not regenerating for the rest of your life, because I used to run marathons, 42K marathons, and like an idiot, I ran my first one when I was 64 years old. And then I ran 14 more over the next 5 years. And I could tell you that every morning when I wake up, my cartilage, my knees remind me that I should never have done that. But getting back to your specific question about regulation, in my particular field, which is the field of a very small molecule, nitric oxide, which our body produces to protect us against heart disease. When I first discovered that, it was important just for cardiovascular disease, because NO is a vasodilator, improves blood flow, it's anti-inflammatory, it prevents coronary artery disease and many things. And then other people found that it did many other things in the body. Okay? And then finally we found that nitric oxide, believe it or not, and I think it's okay to talk about it in this audience, produces erectile function, sexual stimulation in males, also females, but I will not discuss females in this particular event. But what I'm trying to say is nitric oxide does all these things. Now, obviously that must be regulated. When you generate nitric oxide, you don't want to stimulate erectile function while you're eating, for example, or other things. So it's incredible how the body can regulate all these different loops and signaling processes with the same single molecule, just to allow it to work whenever it is needed at a particular place in the body.
Professor Merton, would you like to try?
Well, it's the odd one out who appears to be the only one who's not a scientist. But in any case, if you'll permit me one personal statement, I just wanted to say how delighted I am to be back at the university here. I came often, and indeed I'm an honorary alum, but I haven't been here since COVID. So I just wanted to say how happy I am to be at HKU. Okay. But to answer your question, I think there's a real common factors among medicine, my two colleagues here and there, and economic systems, particularly financial systems, in the sense that they do have these feedback loops, and they do have these tipping points of where things happen, and a variety of others which I won't articulate. So I think that may rationalize why the three of us are here and that question was asked. But to answer it directly here, you mentioned self-regulation. In finance, the financial system, markets overwhelmingly are the regulatory system in the sense you mean it, things within your system that make it work, not regulations like rules. Rules and laws and so forth. And I think you may have been referring to those latter ones in terms of self-regulation. But markets are really fantastic. I don't want to get into that. They process information that no one has, important information, okay? No central bank, and I would dare say, until it gets in there, that there's no entity that has the information. There's no smart people.
Is that because there are so many people?
Well, it's partly that, but it's a simpler system. I mean, you know what you want, you know what you're going to do. You're sitting here in Hong Kong and you want to make a decision and you act on that decision. When you are in the marketplace, you affect prices and so forth. The market doesn't have a brain in that sense. But by using prices, the market stabilizes what its function is, which is to be able to have transactions on a systematic, regular basis that can be executed well. And so what happens is that each of, the price changes, but the manifest function may be to transactions, but there's a very important latent function, which is information. When those prices change and other variables associated with the markets, they are giving you information. Information is collected from everywhere in real time by people who are highly motivated both to have good information about what they do, not about the world, not about everything, some omniscient. Their thing. You're either the price of onions or something.
Could you hold your microphone?
Oh, okay. Now we're on an even keel. But the point is it's not just crowdsourcing sort of thing. It's just a competition. Each person's putting information in, and without turning this into some sort of lecture, think about it. It's not the average out there. It's a weighted average. How is it weighted? If I make a larger transaction, buy or sell, I'm going to have a bigger impact. Who makes larger transactions? Either people with control of a lot of resources, and if you have even in my sense of reality, who has the resources are going to have the best information. They're not going to hire dunces, okay? So the smarter people are entities are finding their way to have a bigger impact, all right? What else is true? If you're more certain about your information for a given size, you'll do more. So I'm just trying to give you an intuition that the market contains two things. One, information that no one has, no one entity has, and it's really important information. And so even if you're very smart and you know very much about what you do, you'd be very wise to pay attention to what that market's doing. And the market, I already alluded to, is that it keeps things going. So that's the regulatory mechanism that's most important, okay? And that is there. But then you brought up, well, what happens when it fails? Now, we have to bring a very different entity in called government. Not because it's a knee-jerk reaction, but particularly with crises, big ones, the ones we notice. With crises, one of the things that I define a crisis in, rather than just a bad set of outcomes, is when something terrible happens and you don't know why. In other words, you could make a bet on the horses. We went to the jockey club. If you would make a bet on the horses, you knew the odds, you knew you could lose, and you lost. Are you happy? No. Okay. But you understand it.
But are you surprised?
You're not. No, it's not you're surprised, because it's more than just as you're surprised. It's you understand the system, and you're going to do the same thing again because you just got a bad draw. But what if, with all the stuff we're doing with technology, we wake up one morning and all our screens are black? You say, my God, what am I going to do? Well, we'll look for it. And then someone says, why? We don't know. That's crisis, because it's outside the system of our understanding. And what do you do when you're engaged in an activity that you've done and so forth when it no longer works? Frequently, I'm sure you've seen in the newspapers, so whenever there's a big crisis, they say, the rules of economics have changed. The rules of finance have changed. Avogadro's number is no longer the same thing. But it turns out that's probably not true, all right? But the sense is they have no anchors. What is just so you don't think it's people being stupid, what would you do if you're engaged in an activity that you've done, you understand the rules of the game, you play or you engage, and then they say, no, you've lost. And you say, why did you lose? I'm not going to tell you. Are you going to continue to play? I don't think so. I think you're going to say, till I find out why or how it's changed, I'm not playing. That's very rational. So this is not about people having animal spirits or something, which they do, But this is structural, all right? What do you think that does to markets if everybody who's sensible says, the rules have changed, I don't know what they are, therefore I'm not going to participate? It aggravates the system. You talk about a feedback loop. So all the reason I'm going and spending the time on this is it's very, very important to understand there is a role for outside regulation, not government because government is smarter, it's because government is an institution that was designed to have enormous power. It can do things that even very, sometimes bad things, but it has the power. And that's what you need in an environment where it's just unstructured. You don't know what's going on. So they can step in, try to stabilize the markets and do things, and hope that the recovery system gets back in going again. So I think that government has a very particular...
But how does the government know what's going on then?
No, they don't have to know. They have the power. No, but they have the power to do what I just said rational people would have otherwise done. They can take care of extra...
That's assuming the government is rational.
Now, let me just remind things, and I'm sure you could give me some from medicine. Now, I wanted to make this point because it's often forgotten. There are financial products, I won't mention, well...
No, well, I think be specific if you can.
All right, well, I can. People say, for retirement, why don't you buy annuities? This seems like a so sensible contract. Think what it says to you. If you retire, it'll pay you every month for as long as you need money. You can never run out. In return, when you've gone somewhere better where you don't need money, you give it up. Who doesn't think that's a pretty good deal? When you don't need it, you give it up, and as long as you need it, you have it. But lots of people love pensions, which are very similar, but they don't buy annuities. They seem to be a puzzle. And the answer is a lot of them are poorly executed. Don't confuse a bad product, one that you don't want to have, with a badly executed product you would have. If you have a car that only starts 1 out of 5 times, you're going to say, I hate cars. You don't hate cars. You hate cars that don't start, okay? And so if you just put that in your mind, you'll find that it deals with some of the puzzles you see out there of this sort. That's only my own reaction to that. Yeah, I'm sorry to run on so long.
Well,
that was great.
Well, thank you for the intervention, and thank you for taking over my role, too. You can continue. You can continue. You're doing an excellent job. I have a slightly different question. Let me see if I can phrase it, and that is, for some reason, systems self-regulates, or it runs itself. It goes on day by day, year by year, and no alarm. And for some reason, sometimes during this process, it's not static. It's dynamic. It moves. There are squeaks. There are fires here, floods there. But more or less, the system runs. Right? It doesn't run like clockwork, but it runs. Then sometimes you have catastrophic failures. Now, what I'm saying is that how do you know in your own fields, how would you consider what is a catastrophic failure? How would you define for example, forest fires. We try to put out forest fires, but then there are theories, there are hypotheses that say maybe forests should burn down from time to time. It's not a catastrophe, it's just a natural course of adjustment and processing. Now, in your own fields, do you come across system failures that requires, as you say in economics, financial, government intervention? Sometimes maybe the intervention is worse than if there were no intervention. So how would, in your own fields, think of this problem? What defines catastrophic failures that will require intervention?
Well, it's hard to apply that to, I think, to certain medical fields. Certainly in my field, I wouldn't know how to answer that question, but I mean, your body does certain things, it follows certain rules, certain cycles, it's well organized, but sometimes something goes wrong, goes awry, and that regulation fails, and that could be exceedingly life-threatening. And so one really has to take measures to stop that or reverse that process so that whatever is changed, doesn't go on to be harmful. And in my particular field, I think it's really it's a lifestyle that humans have. For example, things will go smoothly until all of a sudden you start eating the wrong foods, or you forget to eat the right foods, or you sit down all day long and eat instead of exercising a physical activity. And that can cause a lot of systems to go awry. And the tragic thing about that is all that's preventable and reversible, and it just depends on the person itself. And that's the best I can do with that question.
Yeah, in my younger days, I used to think that doctors were pretty useless because all you had to do was to eat well and take exercise and all of that stuff.
They were right.
And, but then I kind of changed my mind because just after Christmas one year, I sort of had a flu. At least I thought I had flu. That's what it felt like. And I went back, I recovered after a couple of days and went back to the lab and went very happily. And then by Wednesday, I could no longer keep up with a young friend. We were going together to a concert. The next day, I could no longer walk up the escalators on the underground, which is something I normally did in those days. By Friday, I went into the lab, and Ronnie, the storeman, said, "Oh, Tim, you do look rough," he said. "You look just like I felt when I had my first heart attack. I think you should go to bed." So I went to bed. My wife arrived, and I just lay there, and my wife came back at about 7:30 and realized I was pretty sick. And she called up the emergency number, and they said, "Get him to the nearest walk-in clinic as possibly can." And by this time, I could barely walk. I mean, it was staggering. And I went, and the doctor said, "Oh, you've got atrial fibrillation and congestive heart failure." And I must have been within hours of death. So they took me to the hospital, and I fell into the emergency cardiac ward. This was in 2010, by the way.
Right.
And, here I am. So I was, it works. Doctors are important. They saved my life.
Thank you.
Before you go, can I sort of push a bit further? I mean, we know there's a community of Amish people who think they shouldn't treat diseases and let diseases just run as natural courses, right? It's not very scientific. But the point is, can we push you a bit further and say, when does intervention by an outside body regulatory is deemed necessary in your field? How would you draw the boundary? Sometimes the cure is worse than the disease, and so forth. Yeah.
I have a good answer to that. It's called prevent it from happening in the first place. And then you don't have to worry about treating it and curing it. And so again, in my field of health and wellness and longevity, that's what people need to do. It's so simple. 90% of heart attacks and all these problems that occur with the cardiovascular system are reversible and preventable depending upon one's lifestyle. And we need to get the people globally to understand that simple concept. You don't have to go to school to understand that concept. Mm-hmm. It's common sense. Yes. But as I find when I get older, common sense is not so common anymore. And that's the problem we have.
But Lou, in my case, I had an infection, and I don't know whether it was a virus or a bacterium, and I was unaware that the wretched thing had attacked my myocardium.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So, there was nothing much I could do about that.
Okay,
Well, two things I would mention. First of all, there are things which we call externalities. So, for example, and in medicine, not that I'm going to tread in your territories, but I think, I think this is okay, that, if a lot of times people say, look, if there's a willing buyer and a willing seller, there's a willing company that's willing to put a 300-kilometer-an-hour train on a track where the track hasn't been upgraded yet, and so it's maybe good for 150 kilometers. And they'll say, look, a willing, informed entity is willing to put that train on the track, and there are a bunch of people that want to get on that train. Just let them do it. They're self-regulating. The problem is, if it's a train system or the financial system, it's a public entity. And if they take that train and go with 300 kilometers on a track that only supports 150, there's a very good chance they're going to have a wreck. That will damage them, both sides, the provider and the user, but it'll also tear up the track for everybody else. And they didn't make that decision, and that's the answer to your question of why you have to have some mechanism, not all the time, to do it. Lou, you have this great prescription. The problem is, no disrespect to you, they're not sure they should trust you.
Especially because I'm Italian.
Yeah. No, I meant it more, people say government doesn't know what it's doing, it's always bad people. Well, that's an example, if it's true of what I said before, it's a poor execution of something that's a very important function. And I think it's critical that we separate those two, because the answer to what to do, which is the end decisions, the answer to what to do is, if you have a good thing that serves an important function, but it's not working right, fix it and build a better one. Not say, get rid of it. Whereas there's something that's just bad, nobody wants it, you get rid of it. And there's not that much distinction made, particularly in these things. And this is really, really important. And ask yourself, what institution in the mechanism of a well-functioning country, private sector, what institution allows you to do what's needed in that circumstances? You have public health, it would be probably what I was going to say is the closest analogy. Because, you could decide you don't want to give your children vaccines, and the doctor's willing to go along with that, or the country. But my children are going to the school, and if they don't take vaccines and they catch the disease, they pass it on to them. I didn't decide that. And those are very, very common problems. And I'll just make one class statement, and I'll try to be a little quieter. Always understand, and it was said this morning, I think, in a different way in the first panel, first understand what you're trying to achieve. What is your goal? Then evaluate what model to use, whether it's this one or that one, on the basis of what's the best model for that problem. And it's not true there's one best model. It's the best.
Alternatives.
Well, there are alternatives, but there's also, depending what problem you want to solve. And therefore, that's a conditional on it. So with that, you need to realize that there are circumstances in which you need an entity that has special powers to force something that would otherwise not happen. I mean, we all know that the simple solution, if you're in deep fog in the water, and there's lots of boats, what's the best thing to do? Everybody sits still, instead of trying to figure out how to get there, right? Because they won't crash. But how do you get everybody to sit still? Because maybe you do it, but it's not going to do you any good if the people in the next boats are doing it. You see what I'm just trying to get is to say that you have to pick the right model. This isn't for everything, but you've got to make that distinction. The best model for the activity that you're trying to solve. And between that and recognizing that you always have to trade off accuracy with simplicity.
Yeah. Well, trade-offs are always present in any system. May I ask a question? The dangers of making the wrong choices, right? Consider the following: a very major shock, that comes to the system, and how does that impact yourself? Suppose lifespan for everyone in the population now goes to 200 years old. That's a major shock. It could emerge. How does that do to your system? How would you think of the system? Will it be able to adapt without, and what are the challenges in adapting to that system? A major shock, whatever the reason it happens, like longevity to 200. How does that impact all your work and your science?
Perhaps I can start, since that's kind of the field I wound up in. But you know, those of us who work in the field of health and wellness and longevity are not thinking about, nor are we advocating, that we live to 200 or to 100. That's not the point. The point is, whatever many years you are alive, you want to live a healthy, productive life. Instead of being sick, being in the hospitals, and having the, taxpayers pay more money to take care of you, and so on and so forth. So that's the principal thing about longevity, is making your life a really enjoyable, a healthy one, so that you could continue to contribute to society, rather than just live and dump out lots of CO2, which makes the environment worse,
I don't know.
Professor Merton.
Well, I do want to say one thing back on this. I don't think there's anything that's interesting, no matter how functional it is, how good it is, that doesn't have a dysfunction. I think there's a cost to everything. For one reason, if there was no cost and it's great, it's probably already been done. Okay? Occasionally we get a little technology that allows us to do what we wanted to do, we can't. But that, I would just point out that. So in the end, we have to recognize. So in the case of government, not to stay on it, but it's exemplifying, I want to change subjects. You said, well, government may be bad, and that's what people are worried about, because they say, if we give all this power to government and they write a rule, what have they done? They have taken a system that part of its protection is that people do different things, diversify, if you like. And they've forced it to a single, every entity has to do the same thing, the regulation, okay? And we know that will increase the chances of a systemic event. But the way we solve that is not by not regulating, because we need to do it, if we agree, okay? But recognizing the side effect is, I think, the thing you call to a lot of your solutions that we don't like, that makes you sick, but you make that decision. Then you focus on trying to minimize the side effects, not do the problem. And I think that I'm trying to keep it at a level for this conversation that, relates more broadly to these institutional designs. So that's all I really wanted to say about that one.
Thank you.
But it's very interesting. I mean, you talk a completely different language from the one that I'm used to.
Well,
I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying it's very refreshing and interesting to listen to you.
Well, you're very kind. And, he's at least a gentleman. And,
but I mean... But it's completely different from the way that I work as a scientist, completely and utterly, it seems to me. Yeah. How about you, Lou? Do you agree?
It's a little different, I think. I'm a scientist and never really quite understood economics, and I have to tell you that I'm beginning to learn thanks to you, Bob.
Well, you're both very kind now, but this goes to also this question that was raised in the previous session about whether there should be artificial boundaries. And I think, of course, there has to be some kind of categorizations just in terms of the skill sets and knowledge sets. But if that's really true and you find it interesting, then we've made progress. Both of us.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
And so, I would say that this is a kind of collaboration that you get not just from different fields as we define them, but from being from different places and thinking about it.
Exactly. But I mean, on this interdisciplinary business, I was involved in setting up a university in Okinawa. And one of the ideas there, we had lots of cross-fertilization and interdisciplinarity. But I learned when I got there and saw the reality of this thing, that, a biologist like me, who the only exam I ever failed was a maths exam, what contribution am I going to make to theoretical quantum mechanics? I should say the chances are as close to zero as makes no difference. What chances are of the quantum mechanicists with their simple equations or complicated equations of making a contribution to biology? I learned also very close to zero. So, there are gulfs that are difficult to bridge. On the other hand, that's not saying you shouldn't try. And, quantum mechanics and its history is very, very interesting. I love it, but I don't understand it very well. And then,
but would you know, maybe not the science, but the intuition of framing and defining problems or approaching it from a different perspective? Would that be stimulating in the creative, innovative?
Well, it was very interesting in the previous discussion. I mean, basically these were three very different kind of scientists, but they spoke in languages I totally understood, or everything they said, actually. What it's like to discover things, right?
You want to say something? You look like you're about to disagree.
The danger is I always want to say something, so...
That's okay, go ahead.
No. But I was just trying to say, as you were saying, it can help to communicate, and if it makes sense to you, at least that's a good start.
Yeah.
And then you have to make a judgment. Is this a person that says, by the way, I'm Napoleon reincarnate? That might change your assessment of the advice I gave you. But you understand that that's the process. And it can happen, of course, within a field, but it should more and more happen across the fields, as we heard discussed this morning. That's all I really wanted to point out.
But the language you use, I mean, this word externalities. I mean, this is not something that I need to know what your... Well, it's an English word, perfectly good English word, but you clearly use it in a technical sense. And you're very familiar with the concept.
I apologize for jargon.
No, don't apologize for jargon, because you have to use jargon.
Every time I get a medicine, and it's 16 letters long, and I say, couldn't you just call this aspirin? Something like that, or aspirin.
Well, that's the problem today with all these new drugs, these antibody-based drugs. Yeah. Everything ends in a moo-bab, bib-bab, dab-dab.
Yeah, no.
It's a good thing I don't teach medical students anymore. I wouldn't know how to pronounce any of the drugs I'm teaching.
Right.
But by any other name, the point is that I think we want to get to the best answers, and I think that the way to do that is to listen to what people say and say, does it make sense? And if it does, then do what was said this morning. You've now defined a problem. See if it's in fact. Confront it with the data. Talk with others and they say, oh, but you didn't think about this. This is the process that goes all the time. Failures happen, as it's described, not just because you ran an experiment and you didn't get a significant P or something like that. They happen when someone says, did you think about this? And you say, oh, I don't know, but we didn't. I mean, we have, just from economics, when we have these pension systems where the next generation pays for people there, so you put your money in not for yourself, but for the current, and then you say, but the next generation will do it. As long as you believe that it will continue to go, that system works.
Yeah, the trust is all important.
No, but that assumption is probably not a good assumption. That what happens, I'm sorry, but I just want to finish this. Conditions change. In this audience, I think we can say both, in many parts of the world, certainly it was alluded to this morning, the population growth is very low. So the number of people, the next generation who can look after this generation is smaller. What happened? Was the design wrong? No, but it was flawed in the sense it wasn't robust enough. It couldn't deal with a change from post-World War II growth in the US and West and so forth, and population growth. It all works wonderfully, okay? But if conditions change, it falls apart very fast. And so we have to be flexible, and we have to recognize that we have to build into our systems that we don't know the answers, and therefore, in terms of actions, when you're dealing with real people, you better have a lot of robustness. You know, in our cases, you know, a company doesn't need any capital beyond what it needs to buy its equipment if everything goes right. But everything may not go right, so they have to have extra capital. They have to have a buffer to deal with the reality that we don't know the future, we'll never know all of the future, and to pretend that we do is a bad model. Yeah. And if you add to that, that's what would you have in your system? And now I'm on shaky grounds for the two of you, but doesn't the immune system have extra reserves?
Right.
Extra
reserves. Doesn't the immune system have backups in our bodies?
Well, there are many. I mean, there's something called the innate immune system, which is one thing, and then there's the adaptive immune system.
Well, but
so
you know. But the point of the matter is
there are levels of immunity.
There are levels.
Yeah.
You have reserves. You know, you pack a little when you take a trip. Maybe you pack an extra shirt in case you spill red wine that you like on it, and so forth. Well, that's because there's uncertainty, and too many times the abstraction we choose, which by the way, abstraction is, I think, the most important element in success. In other words, why did one scientist team win and one lost? Sometimes because they had different data, but sometimes because they looked at the world with a different set of abstractions, which is what you leave out of your model because you've decided you don't need it, and what you put in. So I'm just saying that this is really the critical element in my mind as to what you do. You have reserves to reserve for uncertainty.
Well, one thing I'd like to say is that because of your work in studying very complex systems, when you come into either situations, as we discussed a bit already, about catastrophic, unknown situations, breakdown of the system, do you find you would, and perhaps you could give an example from your own work or career, what do you go to? A simple abstraction, time-tested abstraction that has helped you deal with it, or you go to very complex models and have faith in complex models? How would you approach a situation that is very unknown in your work? And so that, you know, when system breaks down, how do you try to give an answer or remedy?
Let me say something about that. So I won a Nobel Prize for finding something out about cell division. Now, you might have thought that biologists, when I started out, there was a huge amount was known about cell division. No. When I started out, nothing was known about cell division, except that cells divided, and one or two other very simple facts about them. Why was nothing known? Because nobody could see how to study it. It was too complicated. So my discovery was a very simple one. It wasn't an abstraction, it was a fact that a protein suddenly went away at a particular time in a particular place in the cell. That was a fact, not an abstraction. I then had to, and that tiny little fact totally opened up one's view of how the thing was controlled, and we just needed to find out why it went away, what was it doing before it went away, which was very important. It catalyzed cell division. So there was no model, there was no, I mean, it was very down to earth.
Yeah. Did the recognition, the realization, that was a critical fact? What triggered it?
So Pasteur said that chance favors the prepared mind, and I hadn't been looking for a protein that went away. I was actually doing an experiment, something completely different. I saw this, and when I saw it, I knew immediately what it meant, because I'd been thinking about and worrying about the problem ahead of time. And so I saw this, and I knew within a day that I'd made the most important discovery of my life. And it was very, very unusual, that, as I think Lou would attest. I mean, mostly it takes ages before you know what's going on in biology.
For sure. Let me continue that. Well, similarly to what you found, I mean, you come across discoveries. Sometimes you make discoveries that You'd never think that you're going to make that discovery. But other times, I think if you follow through on some of the observations you make every attempt, because of your curiosity, to take it to the next level. So for me, for 125 years, nitroglycerin, which is the explosive that Alfred Nobel used to make dynamite and made lots of money, which he now distributes to Nobel laureates. Thank you, Alfred.
Thank you, Alfred.
But this nitroglycerin is also very important in preventing a heart attack, cardiovascular problems in the heart. For example, many people take still today, as they did back then, they take tablets of nitroglycerin, put it under the tongue. They cause immediate widening of the arteries, and that reduces the flow of blood back to the heart, that reduces the stress in the heart, and the heart all of a sudden is not ischemic anymore. It doesn't need as much oxygen, and there's relief from chest pain and heart pain. So 125 years went by, and nobody looked at the mechanism of nitroglycerin. I had always been interested in why so many people had high blood pressure and other cardiovascular diseases, while yet others were perfectly free of those diseases. And so I decided that if I knew something more about how nitroglycerin produced vasodilation, widening of arteries, and reducing a heart attack, maybe with that information I'd be able to figure out how to develop new technologies and so on to treat heart disease. And so as a pharmacologist and chemist, I studied the metabolism of nitroglycerin, and I found that when nitroglycerin came in contact with the arteries, it produced a tiny molecule which I identified as nitric oxide, a gas. And at that time, nothing was known about NO, or nitric oxide. It was known to be an air pollutant, a product of combustion. But I studied that nitric oxide and found that it was responsible for the vasodilator effect of nitroglycerin. And being a pharmacologist and being very curious, I wanted to know, what other things does nitric oxide do? And I found out that it was anti-inflammatory, it could prevent coronary artery disease, and many, many other effects. And then I said to myself, oh my God, wouldn't it be something if our bodies actually made nitric oxide to protect us against cardiovascular disease? I applied for research grants, they all got rejected. The NIH said, we're not in the business of sponsoring research to study the environmental pollutants. Sorry, Professor Ignarro. So despite that, I took money from other places, including my own pocket, and did the research, and we showed that our bodies do produce nitric oxide for all of those purposes. Mm-hmm. And so the rest is history. So I agree with what you said. Mm-hmm.
Would you like to add? What is the recognition?
No, I think we should move on.
Okay. It's not because of the times, I hope.
I don't have a clock here, and I don't have a watch, so I have nothing that's...
Now, given your work and your in your field, today we are entering the promise that people say we will be able to know a lot more data and analyze a lot of the data because of the machine learning and artificial intelligence. Do you think that more information availability and ability to process will make a huge impact in your own field? Do you think that might be the case in the work that you work on?
I'm an AI skeptic myself, because AI only knows what's out there in the present literature. And so, you know, research scientists work in the fog. People say science is a knowledge-based thing. It isn't a knowledge-based thing, it's an ignorance-based thing. We want to find out. We don't know what we don't know, mm-hmm. right? And I don't see how AI is going to do it. I mean, it's very good at, you know, answering questions like, when is the first train to Heathrow Airport? but it's not so good at saying, you know, guessing how nature actually is when nobody understands. And how can a brain understand what we don't understand? I mean, it's not a matter of models or anything. I mean, it's stuff you have to find out for yourself. No?
Not all the knowledge is out there for people to
No, I mean, some of
display.
it is,
Yes.
and it's always, you know, I should say that I feel very sorry for you young people out there today, because so much is known that knowing what is not known and knowing what is known is a much more difficult thing than when 50 years ago or 60 years ago when I was in your situation. Sure. You know, the frontiers were closer. Mm-hmm. And actually any stone you turned over was likely to have something interesting under it. Now that's no longer true. So maybe AI will help with that kind of thing.
I agree. I'm not that much of a skeptic, but I mean, I've never used AI. The closest I come to AI is using you know, Alphabet and ChatGPT to answer as a search engine, and I find them to be very useful. But I think that in medicine, for example, and I can only address medicine, AI is now beginning to be and will continue to be extremely useful, not in making original discoveries, no, not yet anyway, but to help, it will help us as researchers, physicians, and so on, to develop better strategies to treat patients. For example, AI is great at looking at amino acid configurations, small protein structures. If you discover a protein, it's incredibly capable of figuring out the structure of the protein. So by doing that, it could figure out receptors. This puts you in a better position maybe to design drugs to interfere or with protein function that would be useful in treating disease. It's that sort of thing that I think AI would be useful in doing. But it's taking information that is already there, already known, and working out problems that would take humans hundreds of hours to do.
But nevertheless, there's one funny thing about AI in medicine. You would think, I would have always thought that AI would be really good for diagnosis. But I'm told it's not for some reason. Do you understand that?
Well, I mean, it is in some cases, maybe not in all cases. In the field of cardiology, it's getting pretty effective. I attended a meeting in Rome last year, sponsored by an Italian pharmaceutical company, and it showed that feeding in the right data from patients suffering from a number of disorders, it was very accurate in predicting or suggesting the best form of treatment for that patient with that particular cardiovascular disease. So I was very impressed with that. Okay. But I don't know if that's true for any other condition.
You want to go, Merton?
I'm signing up, I think, pretty much for what you've said and what was said, I think, in this morning's lecture on this subject. I mean, there's no question AI is going to have an enormous impact and be very helpful. What I am concerned about is that people always think it's going to do more than it can. My wife has said AI shouldn't be called artificial intelligence, it should be called assisted information or something of this sort. It reminds me a little bit, you know, we always have this idea, something's happened now that never happened before, the world's going to be completely different. We did that with the computer, we did that with many other things, and we've adjusted to it. Computers are great. You can, you know, the games like Go, or you have fixed rules. There's no uncertainty.
Right.
Okay? There's not a space of, a sample space that is so large that you can't possibly be exhaustive. And so that's a very different world. So if you tell me by pure computation or the equivalent in data, here we're just giving you the whole rules of the game, that you could eventually be human beings at chess or something, that wouldn't surprise me at all. But that's not what's going on with what we're doing. And that's sometimes, I think, related to this term creativity. I think it's, you know, from a mathematician's point of view, it's the sample space, you know, the dimensionality of this is so large that even with a quantum computer, you're going to fall short. Then you have to have a different set of mechanisms. And that's one of the ways I think about it. So it'll be very helpful, and it'll save a lot of wasted time, and we'll do things. So please don't hear this as putting it down.
Yeah.
But this idea that somehow magically it's going to extract all the data is useful only if it's fully complete. And if someone comes from finance, it's really terrible because we have, you run experiments where you have a sample size. We don't have sample sizes. I mean, I mentioned this, nothing to do with Warren Buffett. He's a great guy and so forth.
Right.
But people say, could Warren Buffett's outcome have been by luck?
Right. Well, Professor Merton, you are in the freest economy in the world. So do you think AI can aggregate information better than the market?
No. But it can, but working together. Do you see this idea you have a hierarchy, the thing. We have a financial crisis as we did 20 years ago. Every question that comes from whether it's CEOs, the press, the politician, what caused it? They want a single answer. They want a hierarchy. Is AI better than X or X? The answer is it's a multiple things. I know we'd like to have a single answer which makes us feel more comfortable, but that's not reality. And so, that's all I'm telling you is try to step back and ask yourself, pursue, AI uses the statistical tools, especially the chat to predict what you want to do. Oh, that's fine, but those statistical rules have a set of rules. They only work if the samples are independent or something. You can't just throw that out. And where do you get the independence if you don't know the sample size? I mean, do you see what I'm saying? So that's all I really wanted to say about that subject. It's not either or. And for my sake, I don't use it very much, but we use it to do some machine learning. It's early days. We use it sometimes as a benchmark to see if they can beat what we already have. We find out sometimes maybe, and other times no. And it's early days. So I think to try to answer this is a sort of profound system. Is the world forever going to be different? Is nobody going to work? Things like that. I know we'd love to know those answers, but, it takes 9 months to get a baby. Many people who have been involved with that would say, after 6 months, I think it would be nice.
Right.
But you got to wait 9 months. I know we're all excited to get results. We're all excited to go as fast as possible, but there are limits. If you want to estimate the mean return on a stock or something like that, the accuracy of that estimate depends on not the number of observations, but the calendar time, like a baby. If I have trillions of observations happening in one day, I get no accuracy at all for the mean. But for the second moment, and I hate to use jargon, for the uncertainty, the what can happen rather than what you expect to happen, it's number of observations. So we use uncertainty, risk, to forecast means because we can measure the uncertainty much more accurately in short periods of time and then infer from that. And so you solve the problem, but you just don't have this mechanical image that if you have enough data, you get the answer to everything. That really I don't find very practical.
Well, Professor Merton, you had the last word. And thank you very much. Please show your appreciation for a very lively panel of Nobel laureates. Thank you very much.
Panelists and moderator, could we take a photo? Thank you all for sharing your thoughts and experiences with us. Please return to your seats. as we reflect on the meaningful discussions we've had today, it's truly inspiring to listen and learn from all the panelists. Now, we would like to take a moment to thank all the organizers, Nobel laureates, and all the esteemed guests for making this event memorable. And a big thank you to everyone for being part of it today. We look forward to continuing these conversations and collaborations in the days to come as we pursue new discoveries and shape a better future together.